Welcome to my channel Galactic War Story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. The moment Delegate Yara Os raised her hand and shouted that single word across the Grand Chamber of Concord, every alien in the room turned to stare at her. Not because a human had dared to interrupt the most sacred diplomatic ceremony in 3 centuries. Not because her voice had cracked with something raw and desperate. They stared because behind her, through the enormous crystalline window that overlooked the ceremony platform, a shape moved through the shadows that should not have been there at all. 1 second. That was all the time left before the Accord of Eternal Silence was signed, a treaty that would have ended humanity's place among the stars forever. Yara had not slept in 41 hours. That fact alone would have disqualified her from attending the ceremony in the eyes of most senior officials aboard the conclave station Meridian. She was 29 years old, the youngest diplomatic aide in the history of the United Earth delegation, and she had spent the last 3 days reviewing trade clauses that most of her colleagues considered too tedious to read carefully. But Yara read everything carefully. That was her reputation. That was her gift. And tonight, that habit had led her to a discovery so dangerous she had told no one, because she wasn't sure who she could trust. The conclave station Meridian floated at the gravitational center of the Orion neutral zone, equidistant from 14 sovereign star systems. It was the most politically sensitive structure in the known galaxy, a place where no weapons were permitted, where surveillance was forbidden by interstellar law, and where the word of every delegate was considered unimpeachable. 37 species had sent their highest representatives here tonight. The ceremony chamber itself was breathtaking, a sphere of transparent alloy wide enough to hold a small city, ringed by tiered observation platforms where thousands of dignitaries and journalists watched in silence. At the center of it all stood the Accord. The document was ancient by galactic standards, older than humanity's first contact with alien civilization, a framework originally written to peacefully dissolve any species deemed a threat to galactic stability. It had only ever been invoked once, 400 years ago, against the Dravathi Collective. The Dravathi no longer existed. Their worlds were nature preserves now, quiet and empty and beautiful, tended by automated systems that served as a silent reminder of what the Accord could do. Tonight, the 14 signatures required to invoke the Accord against humanity had already been collected. The ceremony was a formality. The official signing of the final charter, the document that would trigger humanity's formal dissolution from galactic society, the seizure of human colony worlds, the enforced relocation of every human citizen to a single quarantine planet, was 30 seconds away. Yara stood among the human delegation in the observer gallery, dressed in the formal indigo uniform of an Earth aide, holding a data slate she had not put down in hours. Around her, senior ambassadors stood with grim, pale faces. They had fought hard in the negotiation chambers and lost. Earth's legal teams had filed 47 formal objections. Every single one had been dismissed. The charges against humanity, unauthorized weapons development, covert expansion into protected star systems, interference with 3 developing civilizations, had been presented with overwhelming evidence, and Earth's denials had failed to move a single vote. Except Yara had found something in the clause documents that no one else had noticed. A timestamp discrepancy, small enough to overlook, buried inside a routine procedural annex that cross-referenced the evidence submission dates for the weapons development charges. The files showed that certain critical pieces of evidence, sensor logs and manufacturing records from the disputed Kepler-9 facilities, had been uploaded to the Conclave's Secure Evidence Archive 4 days before the facilities themselves had been inspected by neutral observers. Evidence that existed before the inspection that supposedly produced it. She had triple-checked. She had run comparison algorithms on her data slate 3 times in the bathroom while her hands shook. The discrepancy was real. Someone had fabricated the core evidence against humanity and uploaded it early, and then made an error so minor that it required a 29-year-old aide who hadn't slept in 2 days to find it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the shadow beyond the window. Yara had noticed it 7 minutes ago, a maintenance drone, or something shaped like one, drifting along the outer hull of the ceremony chamber. She might have dismissed it entirely except that she had memorized the station's maintenance schedule as part of her pre-ceremony security briefing. No drones were authorized to operate on this hull during the ceremony. 0 exceptions. The station commander had been explicit. She had watched the shape move for 6 long minutes, telling herself she was wrong, telling herself exhaustion was making her paranoid. Then the shape paused directly behind the section of the chamber wall that corresponded, exactly, to the position of the conclave's supreme arbiter, the ancient, 6-limbed Tharosi elder who held the ceremonial stylus and would complete the final signature. One signature, one death, and the accord would be in legal chaos, the signing incomplete, the proceedings thrown into emergency suspension, during which, Yara realized with cold certainty, every piece of evidence would be re-examined under emergency protocol, including timestamps. The Supreme Arbiter lifted the stylus. The chamber held its breath. And Yara Osai, diplomatic aide, 29 years old, junior staff, nobody important, stepped forward and raised her hand. Stop. The word hit the chamber like a physical force. Every head turned, every alien eye fixed on the young human woman standing alone in the observer gallery. Behind her, through the crystalline wall, the drone-shaped shadow paused. And in the silence that followed, Yara spoke 4 more words that would change the course of history. The chamber did not erupt immediately. That was the most frightening part. When a single human aide shouted across the grand chamber of Concord and interrupted the most solemn ceremony in 3 centuries, the silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of calculation, thousands of minds across 37 species simultaneously deciding what this interruption meant and whether it warranted a response. Yara stood completely still. Her data slate felt cold in her hands. Around her, the other human delegates had gone rigid, horror visible on every face. Ambassador Terrence Webb, the head of the Earth delegation, turned toward her with an expression that contained equal measures of desperation and fury. He was a career diplomat. He understood better than anyone what an unauthorized outburst from a junior aide could cost them. But Yara didn't move her eyes from the window. The Supreme Arbiter, a creature of extraordinary stillness even under normal circumstances, had lowered the ceremonial stylus a few centimeters. Its 6 eyes, distributed evenly around its elliptical head, moved independently, 4 returning to the accord document, 2 drifting toward the gallery where Yara stood. The Tharosi were among the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy. They had seen civilizations collapse and rise across 2,000 years of recorded history. They were not easily surprised, but those 2 eyes stayed on Yara for a long, deliberate moment. The chief arbiter of protocol, a tall, silver-skinned Velun named Counselor Prash, descended from the upper tier toward the floor. Prash moved with the precision of someone who had spent 60 years enforcing galactic law, and the expression on their angular face was not anger. It was something more dangerous, measured contempt. The interruption of a formal signing ceremony was itself a violation of conclave law. Prash had the authority to have Yara removed, and the Earth delegation formally censured on the spot. The human ambassadors clearly knew this. Webb took a step toward her. Yara spoke before anyone else could. She did not raise her voice again. The chamber's acoustics carried every word with perfect clarity, and she had learned early in her career that composure was more persuasive than volume. She stated the discrepancy, precisely and without embellishment. Evidence submission timestamps predating the authorized inspection by 4 days. Specific file identifiers. Specific annex references. The kind of detail that could not be invented on the spot. and everyone in the room with any legal training recognized that immediately. The silence shifted. It was subtle. The quality of attention in the chamber changed, no longer the cool appraisal of a body waiting to dismiss a disruption, but something more alert and uncertain. Prash stopped moving. The Tharosi elder's stylus hand lowered further. At the edge of Yara's peripheral vision, she saw the shape beyond the window begin to drift again, slow and deliberate, continuing its path along the hull. She pointed. She didn't explain. She simply turned to the chamber and pointed directly at the window behind her, and something about that gesture, the certainty in it, the absence of any hesitation, made 36 heads turn toward the crystalline wall simultaneously. The drone-shaped object was clearly visible now. It had moved out of the angular shadow cast by an antenna array and into the full illumination of the station's exterior lights. It was not a maintenance drone. Maintenance drones were small, six-sided, marked with yellow identification panels required by station law. This object was longer, darker, and its forward end bore a configuration that several military attachés in the room recognized before any formal identification was made. Their recognition was visible on their faces, and the faces of military personnel are read constantly by everyone in a diplomatic setting. Counselor Prash activated a personal communicator. The words were brief and quiet, but in the sudden stillness of the chamber, many delegates heard them. Hull security, external intruder, ceremony hall exterior, section 9. The response came back within seconds, and whatever that response contained made Prash's angular face go very still in a way that communicated more than any statement could. What happened next unfolded with the controlled chaos of an institution whose emergency protocols had been designed across centuries of interstellar diplomacy. The ceremony platform was sealed. The Supreme Arbiter was escorted with quiet efficiency to a secure position behind blast-shielded barriers. External security drones launched from the station's maintenance bays in less than 90 seconds, surrounding the intruder object and cutting its movement with proximity fields. It did not resist. Its systems went dark under electronic suppression, and it drifted motionless against the stars. The chamber remained sealed for 4 hours. During those 4 hours, Yara sat in a side room with 2 conclave security investigators and answered every question they put to her with the same calm clarity she had used in the chamber. She walked them through her methodology. She showed them the timestamps. She explained the annex cross-referencing process in enough detail that one of the investigators, a broad, multi-armed Gret-Holly, who had been conducting interstellar fraud investigations for 30 years, stopped taking notes at a certain point and simply listened with an expression of quiet professional respect. The drone was analyzed. Its origin was traced. Its purpose became clear with a thoroughness that left no room for alternative interpretation. It had been positioned to deliver a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse targeted at the bioelectrical signature of the Supreme Arbiter during the moment of signing. The Arbiter would have appeared to die of natural cardiac failure. The signing would have been incomplete. In the legal chaos and grief that followed, the fabricated evidence would have been scrutinized and unraveled. Someone had planned the assassination of the Supreme Arbiter to expose their own conspiracy, rather than allow humanity's dissolution to proceed on falsified grounds. That realization, when it fully settled over the conclave chamber upon the delegates' return, produced an atmosphere unlike anything veteran diplomats could recall experiencing. Prash stood at the center of the floor and addressed the assembled representatives, with a formal gravity that made the air feel heavy. The Accord proceedings against humanity were suspended indefinitely, pending a full evidence review. When the announcement finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then, from the Tharosi elder at the ceremony platform, came a single gesture, a slow, deliberate inclination of its primary head toward the observer gallery, toward Yara. It was the Tharosi gesture of formal acknowledgement, the kind extended to equals. Ambassador Webb found Yara in the corridor outside the chamber an hour later. He stood in front of her for a moment without speaking. Then he said simply that he owed her an apology and that he intended to put her name forward for a senior advisory position before the week was out. Yara thanked him. She meant it, but her mind was already moving forward because she had spent the last 4 hours thinking about something none of the investigators had asked her yet. Who had sent the drone to expose the conspiracy rather than profit from it? Someone had fabricated evidence against humanity, and a completely separate someone had tried to stop the signing, not to harm humanity, but to derail it. 2 different actors, 2 different agendas. The drone's origin had been traced, but its operator had not yet been identified. Yara pulled up her data slate. She started reading.